It's Wisconsin Today. I'm Rob Farrett.
And I'm Kate Archer-Kent. Congressional Republicans around the country are facing difficult questions and at times booing from constituents and protesters who show up at their town hall meetings back in their home districts.
Republican lawmakers in Texas, Georgia, Oklahoma, and other states face confrontations with voters. Wisconsin was no exception. Here's part of U.S. Representative Scott Fitzgerald's town hall last week.
When will you stand up to them and say that is enough?
How can we be represented by you if you don't have a voice in Congress?
Wisconsin Republican Glenn Grothman faced similar questions in a recent town hall.
How significant is this pushback? Anthony Chergosky is Associate Professor of Political Science and Public Administration at UW-La Crosse. Anthony, welcome to Wisconsin Today.
Hi, good morning, Rob. Thank you.
And Christina LaPlante is Assistant Professor of Political Science and Public Administration at UW-La Crosse. Christina, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Anthony, let's start with you. How significant do you see these heated town hall confrontations we're seeing in the news from around the country?
Well, Rob, I think they could be significant. And these town hall confrontations make me think back about a decade and a half to 2009 and the Tea Party backlash to Barack Obama and Democratic majorities in Congress. Tea Party backlash, Tea Party protests during those town hall meetings in 2009, they in a way foreshadowed what would be a Republican wave in the 2010 midterm elections. They indicated some public concern about the Affordable Care Act and healthcare reform at that time. And I think we're seeing something pretty similar right now. Of course, we can't look in our crystal ball and know for sure what's going to happen in the 2026 midterm elections. But we do know that it's common for a party to face some type of backlash when they come into office, having full control over the majorities in Congress and the presidency. So I think these could be politically significant in creating a sense of where the political momentum is, creating a sense of where the political winds are blowing. We don't know exactly where all of this is heading, but we do know that Republicans, now that they are in control of Washington, are starting to face some political headwinds.
Hey, Christina, you study, among other things, voter participation and political behavior. In both these cases, Tea Party 2009, you had Republicans feeling very much on the outside with the Democratic control of the government. 2025, flip it around. Democrats don't see a voice in Congress for them. Can you talk about what motivates people to participate by protesting, as some people have in both those cases, and showing up at these town halls?
For sure. Yeah, I mean, I completely agree with my colleague Anthony here that what we're seeing now is very reminiscent of the Tea Party era, but also to a lesser degree, we're seeing some of the same energy that we saw during Trump's first term. You might recall people were very up in arms and out and protesting, all of the Trump activities. The Muslim travel ban is one that comes to mind. And if you talk with, advocates and members of Congress during that time, they say that a major factor that influenced their votes and their opposition to these movements was largely driven by these protests. So we know that social movements do have the capacity to move elected officials on certain issues. I think one of the reasons that we're seeing voters really come out in droves to these town halls and make their voices heard directly in front of their representatives is because I don't think that there's a lot of agreement or consensus among Democratic leadership about how to go forward. And we saw this a lot in the primaries. Well, not necessarily the primaries, but when Harris was running against Trump, there wasn't a lot of agreement on what that strategy should look like. Do we need to, campaign with Liz Cheney and try to bring Republicans in the fold who might be disaffected with Trump? What do we do with the progressive wing? So there's a lot of kind of disagreement about who exactly the Democrats need to be speaking to. And I think that's why we're seeing such animated protest happening right now among the electorate, because the leadership is kind of straggling behind.
Let's give another listen. We heard Representative Scott Fitzgerald's town hall. Now here's Representative Glenn Grothman, another Republican, at his event.
And I think across the board, he's done some very good things. I think
Republican Glenn Grothman was quoted in a piece by Politico, quote, "I think they were uninformed people, so I really kind of discount that." And Grothman said, "I think once you're informed, you realize we've got a lot of financial problems." Anthony, do you see this kind of public participation swinging a Republican? Not in the case of Representative Grothman in this case.
We have seen varied reactions from Republican members of Congress to these town hall meetings. Some, like Grothman, have indicated, as you noted, that he feels the town hall participants need to learn more, need to become more informed. Others have accused agitators or activists of trying to rile people up and maybe have suggested that these aren't so organic as they are orchestrated. But others have said that perhaps these town hall meetings indicate something real about concerns that voters have. We know that there have been town halls across the country where Republican members of Congress have come away saying that maybe they need to communicate better, maybe they need to be more informed about what Doge and Elon Musk are doing. So, Rob, we've seen a wide range of reactions from the Republican Party to these protests.
Christina, does it matter if this is totally spontaneous or somewhat organized? Back in the Tea Party days, some people were spontaneously showing up. I booked guests on the show who were Republican operatives who were organizing some of these events. It's never just one or the other, is it?
Well, no, and I think what really elected officials need to be paying attention to here is where the numbers are and really paying close attention to the public opinion estimates. We know that it's overwhelmingly popular among Democrats and Republicans that they want some type of congressional or executive action to cut and reduce wasteful government spending. Over 60%, over 70% of Democrats and Republicans respectively feel this way. But when we look at the method by which we make these cuts, that's where the numbers start to break down. I think a public opinion poll last week or maybe 2 weeks ago shows that only 6% of Democrats approve of the way that Musk is handling his position with Doge compared to 70% of Republicans, right? There's obviously some partisan division there. There's a lot of polarization. But when we drill down more specifically and we ask voters, well, do you approve of, Musk shutting down government offices that, he deems as unnecessary? There's a lot of breakdown there because the point boils down to the fact that Elon Musk is not an elected official. So how do we hold him accountable? And that's where the numbers really start to break down. And elected officials need to be paying closer attention to that.
And Doge and Elon Musk came up in the pushback here in Wisconsin and elsewhere at these town halls. Here's some of Representative Scott Fitzgerald's response to that.
I certainly have never been briefed about Doge, and with the probationary moves that have already been done, they're going to have to be scrutinized at some point.
Anthony, Christina was just mentioning public opinion on Doge and Elon Musk. Some Republicans in Congress maybe having some question marks. Do you see any effective efforts from congressional Republicans, though, to rein in what's happening with Doge?
Well, that is the big question. At what point will Republican congressional majorities start to push back and start to maybe try to reclaim that key power of the purse, that key power over budgeting that really has the potential of making Congress a powerful branch, a force to be reckoned with. But of course, Congress has to actively use its constitutional powers in order to have that prominent role within the political system. So I think it remains to be seen just when and to what extent Republicans are going to push back against Elon Musk and Doge. They're hearing it from their constituents, as we've seen in these town hall meetings. At the same time, President Trump seems firmly behind Elon Musk, and we know that party loyalty to the president is a major factor in congressional politics these days.
Talking to Anthony Chergosky and Christina Plant, UW La Crosse political scientist. Christina, one thing Republicans in Congress have got to be watching is this historically tight majority that they have. Been a long time since we've seen anything this close in Congress. Flipping, 3 seats, I think, next year in that would flip control from Democrats to Republicans. How much do you think that weighs on their minds?
Well, I think everybody's got their eyes on the midterms for sure, Republicans and Democrats alike. And like I said, it's how both of these parties deal with the animosity and quite frankly, the rage that we see among the electorate, especially I think Doge makes up a significant portion of that. So how they react in these critical moments is, I think, going to play a really big role in what happens in the midterms.
Another interesting thing, Anthony, in polling, opinions of Democrats in Congress very low, driven in part by Democratic supporters worried that they're not doing enough in their mind to push back against the new Trump administration. How much of a worry is that for Democrats hoping to take back part of Congress next year?
I think it's a bit of a worry, but I also think Democrats can bank on the typical backlash to the party in power that happens in a midterm election. And Rob, I do think there is a bit of a parallel here, as we talked about, between the Tea Party protests of 2009 and the protests today. In 2009, Republicans were just as disgusted with their leaders in Congress as Democrats are today, but it didn't hurt them in the 2010 midterm elections because Republican leaders in Congress were able to ride that backlash to the Obama administration. And so it's pretty typical right now, after a crushing defeat in November, that Democratic members in the electorate would not be all that enthusiastic about the leadership of their party. But we need to see how those attitudes might evolve as the congressional session goes on, and the extent to which it even matters if Democratic voters aren't terribly fond of their leaders. If, maybe that isn't a decisive factor in the midterm elections, and that Democrats could perhaps just ride that typical backlash.
Christina, Anthony mentioned none of us has a crystal ball, but what are you watching for to see how this develops? These protests, these town hall confrontations, things like that, to see whether, hey, this is a flash in the pan for a week or two, or something that evolves into something bigger.
For sure. The biggest thing that I'm looking for is for the Democratic leadership to develop its own version of its Project 2025. I think that was one of the biggest reasons why we didn't see Democratic turnout as high as we should have in 2024, because a lot of Democrats, even Harris to a certain degree, were campaigning on this idea that we've got to stop Project 2025. And while that was important for a lot of voters, it didn't contain enough information for, people who might have been on the fence to turn out and vote, because they didn't know what they were voting for. All they knew is that they were voting to stop somebody else's plan. So I think we need Democrats to streamline an agenda, to come up with talking points that they can message to their voters and, to their base and independents, and get them out to vote. I think one of the biggest missteps coming out of Democratic leadership earlier this month was when House Democratic leader Hakeem Jeffries had used that baseball analogy to describe.
And we have to leave it there. Thanks to our guests, Christina LaPlante and Anthony Chergosky, political scientists at UW-La Crosse.
Coming up on Wisconsin Today, the leader of the Midwest Climate Hub talks about her termination and the setbacks in research and conservation.
By eliminating public servant positions, we're really putting ourselves at risk of losing valuable work, valuable jobs.
Downsizing the federal workforce and impacts on Wisconsin. That conversation is next on WPR News. It's Wisconsin Today. I'm Kate Archer-Kent.
And I'm Rob Farrett. The Trump administration's Department of Government Efficiency, under the unofficial control of billionaire Elon Musk, is making massive cuts to the federal workforce.
While an official government tally of the firings hasn't been released, in recent weeks, thousands of federal workers have been let go in nearly every part of the country.
Until a couple of weeks ago, Lori Nowatzki was Associate Director and Science Coordinator of the U.S. Department of Agriculture's Midwest Climate Hub, which covers 8 states in the region, including Wisconsin.
Based in Ames, Iowa, Lori has been in the civil service her entire adult life and holds a doctorate in rural sociology. We spoke Monday afternoon, and Lori starts by describing what it was like to receive this termination letter.
It was honestly a little jarring. It was unexpected, like for so many other people who were terminated on February 13th or in the days following. I found out on the afternoon of the 13th that several probationary employees in our location were going to be terminated within hours. I actually did not expect to receive a termination letter because I have served for the USDA since 2021, and I have previous federal experience before that. So a long career in public service, but I had transferred to a new role in January. And so that seems to have triggered my termination that night. I received my letter at 10:30 on the 13th, but did not find out about it until about 7:30 the following morning, and had the rest of that day to complete offboarding paperwork and finish my employment at USDA.
Some federal workers have received notices claiming that their performance was, quote, not adequate to justify further employment at the agency. What stood out to you about the words in your letter?
Yeah, that was a surprise for me, given that myself, as well as others at my location who I work with and know very well, had received excellent performance reviews, had received merit awards in the months and years leading up to this. Two team members that I recruited into our team in the last year also were terminated in the days following February 13th. And both of those team members are from Southern Wisconsin and are excellent early career scientists who I feel lucky to have worked with, and they really had high quality work. They were incredible public servants and really worked hard to deliver good science and information to Wisconsinites and Midwesterners across the region. But they were also terminated for what appeared to be, quote, performance issues.
Have you talked with them, and what have those conversations been like?
Yeah, we have been speaking. In fact, there's several terminated feds around the region and around the United States that are kind of gathering for support and camaraderie. So I speak regularly, probably daily, with the team members who were terminated alongside me. We are working together to navigate the appeal process, the unemployment filing process, as well as supporting each other in job searches.
What is the appeal process like? Can you explain it?
Yeah, so the appeal process goes to an agency called MSPB. The acronym is escaping me right now, but
the U.S. Merit Systems Protection Board?
Thank you. Yes, that would be it. So that was outlined in our termination letters that we can submit an appeal within 30 days to the board. And they review, issues with employment decisions and other ethics issues across the federal workforce. So several of us intend to submit an appeal to that in the hopes that it will be acknowledged by the board that firing probationary workers for apparently no reason, kind of inaccurately stating performance issues, is not grounds for termination. So several of us are seeking out that pathway and in hopes that something can change.
So as you do that, there are certainly the effects you've talked about, looking to your colleagues for support in this times. What are the immediate effects of losing your job in this way so suddenly and with little notice?
Yeah, I think the biggest effect for me that I felt on Friday was really a sudden grieving for the work that I did and the people that I worked with, and not being able to do that anymore. At the USDA Midwest Climate Hub, we work so hard to deliver climate and weather information to farmers and producers around the Midwest. In the face of some really extreme and unpredictable weather patterns in the Midwest, it's been really important to kind of interpret climate data and bring that to the public. And that is work that I loved and that I felt fulfilled by. I worked with some really incredible people, both, researchers at USDA and universities, but also farmers, agricultural advisors who really helped inform our work and hopefully benefited from it as well. And so I think the emotional issues that follow these terminations has been sort of the biggest impact so far. And then, of course, there's other kind of more practical concerns. So we're in a very lucky position that my husband is employed and we have another source of income for the time being. But I know several families who lost their only source of income last week during the federal terminations and are kind of scrambling to find their next work, find a new way to get healthcare. Maybe several moved here to Ames or to their work locations for their position and now are left wondering if they should move again. So certainly a lot of really emotional and financial and other challenges folks are grappling with this week. One thing that is so stark to me about the last few weeks is the disproportionate impact on early career professionals. I'm 10, 15 years into my career, but the effect this has had on so many young scientists and administrators seems to be the predominant theme among those that I've seen who are terminated. So,
Well, these young scientists, they may now go in a totally different direction in life. And
right,
regardless
yeah,
of what happens now, this could have ripple effects many decades and generations into the future.
absolutely, yes.
Yeah. We're talking with Lori Nowatzki, who was recently terminated from her position overseeing the USDA's Midwest Climate Hub as part of the Trump administration's massive cuts to the federal workforce. Lori, let's hone in here on the Midwest Climate Hub. This was not your first job with the federal government. Can you tell us about your personal journey through the civil service?
Sure. So when I was 17 years old, I was living in Dayton, Ohio, and I wanted to get some experience as a young person interested in science. So I was employed by the Department of Defense at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base as a student lab assistant at the Air Force Research Labs. I spent several summers as well as worked part-time during the school years there during college. So several years kind of, I suppose, getting my start and learning what kinds of careers were out there, what it meant to be a scientist. So that was an incredible experience that really paved the way for me to figure out what I'd like to do and also highlighted the importance of public service in my mind. I went on to go to graduate school and then came to Iowa to for my husband to come to graduate school here at Iowa State University. And I got a job as an extension specialist. So I was working for the state, but for several years was sort of doing data analysis and public service for the state of Iowa. But I came to the USDA in 2021 to serve as coordinator for the Midwest Climate Hub. So really a great opportunity to learn more about how climate change is impacting agriculture in the Midwest and also understand how not just climate change, but just kind of regular variation, extreme weather events are affecting farmers and production in the Midwest and making it even harder to farm in this context. And so I really have learned a lot alongside the incredible climatologists and other scientists on our team. And I was really thrilled to be promoted to Associate Director of the Climate Hub in January, just 3 weeks before my termination.
What are some of the projects you'd like to highlight from the Midwest Climate Hub, and especially as it relates to farmers?
Yes, there are several. So as I said, we have a pretty strong team at the Midwest Climate Hub. Several are still working there, several climatologists as well as social scientists. I'm a social scientist myself, so we really did our best to merge those sciences to be of service to farmers and the agricultural community. One really well-received product that we put out on a regular basis that went out to 1,200 subscribers, and still does, I think, although I'll admit that I don't know the inner workings right now as I've been out for a week and a half. But we worked really hard every month on what we called a Midwest Ag Focused Climate Outlook. And essentially, it was a 4-page document that takes all of the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration's climate and weather data and tools about what's happening with the weather now, what's going to happen in the coming months, and we would place it into the context of agricultural decision making. So we have heard from several, USDA employees who do agricultural advising and conservation planning, as well as extension specialists across the region, that this was a really important way to bring that climate data and climate information to farmers on the ground in the Midwest. I'll also highlight that inspired by that work, one of the terminated employees who is from Wisconsin, he initiated the Wisconsin Ag Climate Outlook, which was a weekly report that he would spend hours on every Tuesday to prepare for a University of Wisconsin Extension website. And this was sort of a Wisconsin-focused interpretation of climate and weather data for agricultural decision makers. So I don't know what the future of those tools are now that capacity at the Climate Hub has been so depleted, and we've lost 2 scientists and myself as one of the leadership roles. And so we're not sure what the Climate Hub will be able to continue providing to the region.
I would imagine these documents, these climate outlooks, they would help farmers make really big decisions like when to plant and when to harvest.
Yes, a lot of it was when to plant, when to harvest. Also, what to expect as far as being able to plant cover crops in the coming weeks, or when to apply fertilizer in the early spring or after the season in the fall. So there's a lot of micro decisions throughout the year for farmers and land managers, and weather and climate just add a complexity to that is not always easy for everyone to interpret and understand. And we were trying to kind of help fill that gap.
And Lori, WPR has been hearing from some farmers who had grants frozen through the USDA's Natural Resources Conservation Service. And I'm wondering your thoughts on how might farmland and watershed sustainability projects be affected?
That's a great question. And I'll preface this by saying that I was part of an agency, the Ag Research Service, that does not disperse those kinds of payments. But I am hearing similar stories like that from my colleagues at the Natural Resources Conservation Service, including some from Wisconsin, who are saying that farmers are really struggling to make ends meet because they're not getting the reimbursements that they had applied for and were approved for several months ago. And it can make it really hard for them to deal with their bottom line if they had expected those payments.
So as far as you know, is the Midwest Climate Hub staying intact even while losing critical staff?
As far as I know, it is staying intact. I think the current administration is, of course, voicing concerns about continuing climate-related work. I do want to kind of take this opportunity to share that climate and climate change are 2 different things, but those 2 concepts are being conflated into one. And so anything that works with even near-term weather and climate is having a lot of concerns about what might be coming down the line. So they're still there doing the work, providing the resources, and there to answer questions, but capacity is definitely a concern now.
You've said that you're grieving your life in public service. Can you say more about what being a civil servant has meant to you?
I grew up as a military kid. My father was in the Air Force for 30 years. Both of my grandfathers were in the Navy for that long as well. My entire life has been about public service, even before I could have a job. And it has always meant a lot to me to do work that supports public missions, public endeavors that are in some ways free from the influence of various private efforts or initiatives. And so there's a lot of work being done by public servants that really can't be filled by the private sector. And I think by eliminating public servant positions, we're really putting ourselves at risk of losing some really valuable work, valuable jobs, and also putting workers' rights as a whole at risk across all sectors. And so I think this is all coming together in the last week as sad for me, I think.
Have you started looking to the future and thinking about what's next for you, what's next for your career?
I am thinking a lot about that, and I've been trying to find ways to continue working in agriculture, natural resources, climate change. I have initiated a consulting service in the hopes that perhaps short-term contracts or projects might come up, but I also am applying for full-time positions. The reality is that public service roles are not available at this time, at least on the national scale. Some are at the state levels, but I am applying for roles at nonprofits and universities in the hopes that maybe something will allow me to continue doing the work that I love doing.
Lori, thank you for joining us. Thank you so much for sharing your story.
Thank you very much.
Lori Nowatzki was Associate Director and Science Coordinator of the U.S. Department of Agriculture's Midwest Climate Hub. It covers 8 states, including Wisconsin. She received a termination letter on February 13th.
Thousands of federal workers caught up in the Trump administration's cost-cutting efforts now face a difficult search for work, and the Wisconsin Project wants to hear from you. Are you a federal employee in Wisconsin or a contractor who's been impacted by the latest efforts to reduce the federal workforce? How are the administration's new policies affecting you and the work you do?
If there's information you'd like to share about ongoing changes across the federal government, reach out to Wisconsin, and that address is wpr.org/Wisconsin. And note that's WHY-Wisconsin. That address again, wpr.org/Wisconsin.
Still ahead on Wisconsin Today, Big Top Chautauqua and Bayfield County is facing financial challenges and making changes to continue their decades-long tradition of bringing live music to the region.
We are really conscious of making sure that we continue to be this viable member of the community.
Check out the changes and what they mean to that community coming up on WPR News. You're listening to Wisconsin Today. I'm Rob Farrett.
And I'm Kate Archer-Kent. Now it's time for Wisconsin Life. Here's producer Maureen McCullum with a story about making connections thousands of miles apart.
Sending a message in a bottle has been romanticized for centuries. And as author B.J. Hollers tells us, it helped one Wisconsin veteran connect with humanity on a deeper level. Hollers shared this story at a live Wisconsin Life storytelling event in Eau Claire at the Lakely.
Shortly before midnight on June 28, 1991, 26-year-old Sergeant Ted Simpson gripped a wine bottle, peered out at the Atlantic, and from his place aboard the cargo ship, threw it as far as he could. Whatever happened next was out of his hands. The message he tucked into that bottle was now at the mercy of the waves. Sergeant Simpson, who'd spent the last 3 years serving for the 18th Airborne Corps during the Gulf War, was also at the mercy of the water. Yet after 3 years as a member of a helicopter crew, his last and latest mission seemed the safest way to end his military career and return home to Wisconsin. Ted and the rest of his crew had boarded the cargo ship 23 days before. Their journey from a port in Saudi Arabia to the military ocean terminal near the Statue of Liberty would transport them 10,000 miles in 31 days. However, within a few weeks, boredom set in. It was just the same scene day after day, Ted recently shared from his home in Eau Claire. And so I started to get creative. One evening, Ted glanced up from the book he was reading in the ship's rec room to notice an empty wine bottle. Heck, Ted thought, I should put a message in that bottle. Ted began working on his letter, which included his name, rank, and recent service in Operation Desert Storm. After 3 years of enduring a front row seat to the horrors of war, he was grateful for this final mission to have found a way to serve as an emissary for peace. After he completed his letter, adding his parents' home address in Cedarburg, he tucked it into the bottle and corked it. Yet Ted knew that a cork could hardly withstand an ocean's worth of water. Ted determined that his best bet to preserve his letter would involve dipping the top of the bottle into a thick latex paint of which the ship was never in short supply. At last, the bottle was ready to go. It was a perfect night, Ted later remarked, to send the bottle on its journey. 10 months later, on an April day in 1992, Anne McLennan of the Isle of Harris, off the Western Isles of Scotland, went for a stroll along the beach near her home. There, she discovered a green bottle with dried paint along the bottle's top. Curious, she took it home, removed the paint, and fished out the letter within. The following October, Ted walked to his mailbox in his home in Racine to find a brown envelope with an airmail sticker forwarded from his parents' address. "Dear Mr. Simpson," the letter began. The letter described how she had discovered the bottle and its message, which was, quote, "found intact and without any dampness." Her letter also included a postcard showing the beach where the bottle was found after traveling 10 months and 2,000 miles. Ted replied, thanking Miss McLennan for her letter, which restored his faith in humanity and provided him with some much-needed closure to his military service. He never heard from her again, though he always wondered what became of her. After a bit of sleuthing, my friend regretfully informed me that Miss McLennan had passed away years before. I informed Ted of the development, and while he lamented the loss, he also expressed gratitude that he and Miss McLennan had the opportunity to cross paths at all, that thanks to an idea and an empty bottle, he was able to find kindness and connection from a stranger half the world away. All these years later, Ted remains grateful that the waves granted the bottle mercy. "I did it because I wanted to put some good back into the world," Ted says. Message received. Thanks.
Author B.J. Hollers shared that story on A Message in a Bottle at a live storytelling event in Eau Claire at the Lakely. It was hosted by WPR's Wisconsin Life and the Chippewa Valley Writers Guild. To hear the full story, go to wisconsinlife.org or check out the Wisconsin Life podcast. Wisconsin Life is a co-production of Wisconsin Public Radio and PBS Wisconsin in partnership with Wisconsin Humanities. Additional support comes from Lowell and Mary Peterson of Appleton. I'm Maureen McCullum.
It's Wisconsin Today.
For more than 3 decades, Big Top Chautauqua and Mount Ashwa Bay have brought music enthusiasts and skiers to Bayfield County.
The Northern Wisconsin region is home to the Ashwa Bay Alliance, which operates both nonprofit organizations out of the same venue.
In a recent public letter, the Alliance says it's seen a loss of nearly $1 million since 2022.
From snowless winters to rising performance costs, the group is changing its operations in an effort to keep the organization around well into the future.
Gary Shala is executive director of the Ashwa Bay Alliance. Gary, thanks for joining us today.
Rob, thank you for having me.
Before we get into what's going on now, can you give us a little bit of the history of Big Top Chautauqua?
I'd love to. So Big Top Chautauqua has been around for 39 years this summer. Started by a group of musicians. As they played and got better, they really formed especially Warren Nelson, formed a really amazing talent for educational and historical musicals, I'm going to call them, documenting the area around Ashwa Bay and the Apostle Islands and the history of the Apostle Islands, as well as then being contracted by local cities and towns to do educational historical pieces about those communities and how they came to be. Then continued to build what we know now as the Big Top Chautauqua, doing both historical and educational pieces, as well as bringing in artists from around the country and around the world. Every big name that you can think of for the past 39 years has probably been at one time or another, either in the beginning of their career or at the end of their career at the Big Top.
And Big Top shared, in effect, a hill with a ski and recreational area. And just a few years back, there was a merger, a joining. How did that happen?
Correct. So a little history on Mount Ashwa Bay is 76 years old this year. The local ski hill, the ski hill where families brought their generations and generations of kids to learn to ski, to enjoy the outdoors, to really have a huge communal effect on the sport of downhill and the sport of Nordic. It's I always tell the story I think is really cute is that we have a swap in November of gear and clothing, and it's fun to watch each year, especially the snowsuits, because as families grow and kids grow, the snowsuits travel from family to family, from generation to generation. Just a wonderful place for adults and school children to learn how to ski and be active in the outdoors.
Now, this recent public letter issued by the Asheville Bay Alliance said, hey, some significant financial setbacks for the organization, especially since the pandemic. Can you paint us a picture of the situation there?
Yeah, I think that we all went through a really tumultuous time with the pandemic. During that time, so many things have changed. Base wages, especially, have changed. The cost of artists has skyrocketed. The cost for travel and for lodging, again, all things that influence our businesses as the Asheville Bay Alliance. And so we're really dealing with an onslaught of new costs, new variables, and new ways that we need to address a patron base that is aging, and that we need to have more younger patrons coming to the Hill with their families and experiencing the magic on the Hill.
On the music side of things, making the case in that letter, I mentioned that some shows, even if things go pretty well, you're pretty much running at a loss because of some of those costs you mentioned. How often does that happen where you put on a show, but it's a money loser, not a money maker?
Unfortunately, more times than not, and that is a problem and an issue. And so, what we're really looking to do in this transitional year is somewhat limit the number of shows so that we can limit our production costs, our upfront costs, and kind of recoup a little bit of our financial base to then expand again in 2026 and beyond. And it's just hopefully a 1-year reset that we can get some things under control and look to 2026, which is going to be our 40th anniversary, as a year of really celebration and magic at the Big Top.
And I should bring up, regular WPR listeners are familiar with one big part of the story, Tent Show Radio. The Alliance stopped producing that. We had aired that on WPR until last August. Live recorded music on a Big Top for about 38 years, I think. What went into that decision? I'm sure it wasn't an easy one.
The decision was part of the unionization of the BCO. Blue Canvas Orchestra is our house band that grew out of the original members of the string band. So unionization put some criteria around Tent Show Radio, and so we unfortunately had to, through legal counsel, pull that show from publication.
Gary Schala is with us, Executive Director of the Asheville Bay Alliance. They operate Big Top Chautauqua and Mount Asheville Bay, a ski and recreation area in Bayfield County, talking about financial challenges and the road ahead. And Gary, you mentioned, cutting back a little bit for now on shows and rethinking in some ways your mission and how you serve it. What are some of the things you have in the works now?
One of the things that we've done is that we had the opportunity most recently, late last year, in Washburn, which is a community just 10 minutes to the south of Bayfield. There was a theater called the North Stage. It's a true theater style venue, beautiful stage, as well as a porch that for the summer. We had the opportunity to lease the North Stage for the next year and try this smaller venue to be able to diversify our offerings to the community. So not only having Blue Canvas Orchestra shows there, but also having film festivals and hopefully comedians and different genres of music in a smaller venue where we can really help control some of those huge costs that it takes to operate a big venue like the Tent. We have had a smaller stage as well at our corporate offices in Bayfield called the Backstage. It seats about 100 people. It's very intimate, very close. The acts there can really be up to about 6 people, musicians and artists. And it really gives people an intimate setting that you're right there with the artist. Along with that venue, the Backstage, we have a really successful open mic night on Wednesday nights that runs year round. This gives us a free venue. Anyone can come in at any time, and artists can come in at any time during our Wednesday night and perform. And it has become a really community engagement piece and something that we look forward to on a weekly basis because you never know what's going to happen at the Backstage.
You use that phrase, community engagement. This is a big change. I'm sure many people in the area may feel really committed to the institution and the way it's operated over the years. How have you reached out to work with people to explain the need for a change and make the case for some of the changes you're making?
Thanks for that question, because we have been not working in a bubble. I've been doing personal emails to our patron base, trying to keep them up on what's going on. I ran a long series of community coffees over the last quarter of last year, and look to maybe reinstate those in the coming months as well. We have newsletters, and we have obviously Facebook and our website. So we've been trying to disseminate this information as best we can. And we hope that as we're doing that, the community would not theorize or, in the absence of what they see as facts, make up their own story. We're always happy to answer questions. I'm always happy to answer questions, and my door is always open.
We've focused on changes on the music and performance side of things. How about the winter recreation side of things?
I can't tell you how good it is to have snow this year. We had a good season last year. We did, and we're able to run our Nordic race last year, which was a real accomplishment, and I kudos to the team. This year, again, we were one of the few places that had good snow, and our Nordic race this year was 3 times as big as ever before. That Nordic race is really an important race for the colleges across the state. The colleges across the state and in Minnesota need to have 2 races in order to compete in nationals. And it's not about time, it's getting those races in. And when we don't have snow, it's really tough for these young people to achieve their dream of going to nationals. So the downhill has been spectacular. Our ski team just competed in the state competition where we had a couple of young skiers as standouts. So we're really proud of really where we've come in the last 5 years under Doug Olson. Our grooming is second to none. And the people that are using our Nordic trails right now they're in bliss because they have been so good this year. And our groomers have been meeting the challenges every day.
The combo of the two things, Big Top and the recreation, a unique institution in a lot of ways. Can you talk about what you see your organization meaning for Bayfield County and the surrounding area?
What we mean for the Bayfield County and the surrounding area is really a huge economic driver for both the tourist side and the employment side. And so we are really conscious of making sure that we continue to be this viable member of the community. And I think that one of the things that we've done in the past couple of weeks, we've done a lot more community events where we're hosting events for the community to benefit the community. The Blue Moon Ball with the Recreation Department was a great success and helped them raise some funds. We just put on Reggae on the Res with Legendary Waters, and that was a huge success. We're looking at a music festival, our first ever in September, and that's going to be really a great collaboration with community and Mount Astral Bay and Big Top, where not only will you be able to come and camp and to take some classes and to mountain bike and to maybe have some guided hikes, but hear 2 days of amazing music on 2 different stages. And that's a true collaborative effort between these 2 sisters in the organization.
Gary, we'll leave it there. Thanks again for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I wish you a great day.
Gary Shala is Executive Director of the Astral Bay Alliance. The organization operates Big Top Chautauqua and a ski and recreation area in Bayfield County. There'll be heavy competition coming up in Green Bay as top performers from around the country hope they get picked number 1. And I'm not talking about the NFL draft.
Nope. The competitors in question, they're cheese. It's the U.S. Championship Cheese Contest with over 2,400 entries in more than 100 different categories.
The event kicks off next Tuesday. My request to do an in-person fact-finding expedition was rejected again.
Boo. But how about you? Are you going to the event? Are you competing? Maybe you're doing some public sampling? Tell us about it. Email wisconsintoday@wpr.org. That's wisconsintoday@wpr.org to get in touch, or you can call or text at 888-642-0232.
Or if you're not going, just tell us what's your best in show number 1 favorite cheese. Again, email wisconsintoday@wpr.org. Hey, maybe we'll bring on our own cheese expert, Dean Knetter, for some analysis.
Wisconsin Today is the work of a team of producers, hosts, and technical directors. Learn more about us at wpr.org/Wisconsin Today. I'm Kate Archer-Kent.
And I'm Rob Farrett. You're listening to WPR News.